The video game industry was born in the arcades before it immigrated over to the lands of computers, consoles, handhelds, and so forth. Our guest today has been there throughout all of those phases of the industry. And we are very pleased to talk to him today to try to get a feel for what that transition was like. Welcome to the show, Joe Morici.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem. So let's go way back to the beginning. What is the moment that gets you into the video game industry? How do you end up in the game industry? What was your background, education, and so forth?
Oh, great story, actually. So I graduated from Santa Clara University, which is here in Northern California, with a degree in economics. And really wasn't much you could do with econ at that point. So I was a banker, believe it or not, for a couple of years. I worked for Crocker Bank, which is now part of Wells Fargo, and was an assistant vice president there after I went through their very prestigious management development program, which is kind of bullshit, but I went through that. And then I was assigned to a branch in South San Jose as the assistant vice president. And after a couple of years, 2-3 years, it was just boring, routine work. I was the operations manager of the bank. And I went up to the manager, whose name was Maynard. I remember very well, Maynard Kreider. And I said, I just don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And at that point, this is before computers primarily. So there was an ad in the newspaper that said regional salesperson needed for a startup video game arcade company called Universal USA. And so I went and interviewed with, it wasn't Nakayama at the time. It was, I can see his face. Oh, I forgot his name. But so it was a Japanese company, basically. It came into the U.S. And we had a few games before, a game called Mr. Do, it was kind of a Dig Dug ripoff, basically, is what it was. Actually, it was pretty good. We sold a ton of them. And so what happened was I came in, I was a regional salesperson. Nakayama, that name comes up again in the future, came in at one point to Universal USA as the president. And his English was not very good. And we were having a little bit of difficulty, actually a lot of difficulty, trying to get American distributors to carry our product. So what we decided to do is I went to Nakayama and I said, look at George, so we're having trouble getting the American distributors to carry our product. Let's start our own distributing company. So that's what we did. So we had, at one point we had 4 offices, one in Portland, Vegas, LA, and Santa Clara. And I managed all of them. And so we started selling directly to the operators, bypassing the distributors. And,
can I interrupt just real quick? So sure. We're talking, 1980, 81 at this point?
Yeah, I would say that. Probably 81, yeah. Yeah, okay. 80, 81. I would say that's probably even, yeah.
Yeah, and just to give a lay of the land, how powerful or important were the distributors, and was there like regional monopolies in this business, or how did it work?
No, there was no, well, I guess you could say every distributor had a territory. So we probably had in every major city a distributor, and they were given a certain territory by the large manufacturers like Bally, Williams. They had a certain territory they were supposed to sell in. And so what we were doing is, we tried to get them to carry our product. They wouldn't do it, basically. So we said, okay, well, we'll just start our own distributing company. So at that point, the business was booming, the arcade business. And so I came in to run the distributing company. There was my counterpart was Bill Cravens at that point, who came in and was running the coin-op side. I was running the distribution side at that point. And so Bill was able to, sadly he's passed away, but he was able to gray market arcade games by the truckload to us. So we just gray marketed the games, and we started selling, basically undermining the distribution network because we were selling direct to the operator. So they were getting very angry with us. But then we came up with, instead of a dedicated upright, we had a conversion kit called Mr. Do, which was graphics and a printed circuit board that's pretty much it, really. We were selling for, I forgot now, but it was like $2,000 a piece, which was huge profit at that point. And we were selling, I don't know, 20, 30,000 of them. We were selling a lot of them at the time. And so we kept selling. We started doing better and better. We had Mr. Do, Mr. Do's Wild Ride, Mr. Do's Castle, everything with Mr. Do, basically. And the guy that owned it was named Okada. And supposedly Okada had mob ties in Japan. I don't know if that's true or not, but supposedly he did. So we're selling arcade games. And then this is when Bally comes into the market. So George Nakayama's there, right? The president. I'm running the distribution side, calling on the operators directly, hurting the existing distributors' business, because I had a good relationship with a lot of the operators, and especially in Northern California. So they were buying from me because I was basically undercutting and undermining everybody else. Mm-hmm. So Bally comes to me, a guy named Will Laurie, at the time was managing Bally Advance in San Francisco. Big, we're huge. I mean, we had a huge warehouse. We sold everything with a coin-operated mechanism. So we sold vending machines, pool tables, jukeboxes, dart machines, a video game, everything you could possibly make. And so Will Laurie took me to lunch. He said, I want you to come and work for me. I said, well, I'll think about it. So he goes, I'll give you a $10,000 raise. And that was a lot of money back in the early 80s, right? So I go to Nakayama and I say, George, his name was Yoshihito, but we called him George. So I said, George, look, if you match this offer, I'll stay. He goes, no, I'm not gonna match the offer. I said, fine. So I left. So then go to Bally Advance. I was the youngest sales manager that they had, and everybody that was reporting to me were 20 years older than me at the time, and they did not like me whatsoever because I was the manager now, right? So, and we were doing really well. We were selling, you name it, everything that, like I said, operated with a coin. And so I was there a couple of years. They gave me a company car. They gave me the raise. Will Laurie gets replaced by a guy named Ron Carrara, who was the manager of the Bally office in South San Francisco. And so at that point, Bally, well, a couple of reasons. So I ended up leaving Bally, but a couple of reasons, because Bally had bought the casinos at the time, at that early 80s, right? And they had to basically divest themselves of all the distribution network. That was part of the deal when we went public. I mean, not went public, when they bought the casino in Las Vegas and Reno. So they had to basically get out of the coin-op business because it was kind of, well, another thing, they're supposedly mob ties at Bally, but who knows at this point. So they sold off the San Francisco office to a guy named Ira Bettelman, which is C.A. Robinson, which is a big coin-op distributor down in L.A. And Ira wanted me to go work for him, but I thought, no, unless you're family with Ira and the Bettelman family, you'll always be an employee. So I thought, nah, I'm gonna end up resigning. So at that point, Capcom USA was just coming into the U.S. This was like 82 or 83, I think. Something like that. I forgot what it was now, 82, 83. And so I went, and at that point, Nakayama was the president of Capcom USA, the same one that ran Universal. And George came to me and he said, I'd like you to come back and work for him, because he knew Bally was being basically liquidated. I said, okay, George. I said, it's a good story. So I said, I had a letter that Ron Carrara gave me that gave me a $10,000 raise. So I went to Nakayama. I said, if you match this offer, I'll come back and work for you. So he goes, okay, he gave me the $10,000 raise I never got originally. So I got actually a $20,000 raise.
Nice.
So I go back to, I think I was the second or third person that went to work for Capcom USA. And at that point, we were in strictly the coin-op business. And I came in as a regional salesperson for the coin-op business, reporting to a guy named Bill Cravens, who I knew at Universal. It was kind of it's still a small industry in many ways. So I go there, run the sales to run the regional sales for coin-op for Capcom, which was Kenzo Sugimoto, who now owns a very, very successful winery up in, I think it's in Napa. He spent $100 million on his winery over there. Wow. It's called Kenzo Wines. You can actually Google it. It's expensive. So Kenzo is now president of Capcom. He sold basically sold IRAM to IRAM was a game called Kung Fu Master, basically back in the early days. So sells that, starts Capcom. I go to work there, run the regional sales department, reporting to Bill. And then at that point, Nintendo had just started, and we were one of the first. I think we're one of the first 4 or 3 licensees that could make software for Nintendo. And we had nothing but coin-op games, but they were good. We had Commando, Ghosts and Goblins, 1942, Gunsmoke, some really good coin-op games. And so we make the deal with Nintendo to go sell cartridges for their NES system. Nakayama goes, "Do you want to start the consumer division?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." The coin-op division, I knew was going to end up failing because I saw Nintendo killing it in the early days with sales to the home market. So I said, "Yeah, I'll run it." So I basically started the Capcom consumer division at that point. So just me, and I started hiring sales reps across the country because that's what they did. We basically hired salespeople, independent salespeople, paid them a 3% commission, which most of them are very, very wealthy now because we paid them millions and millions of dollars in the past. So go in there, start the consumer division, basically converting coin-op games to consumer games. First games we came out with were 1942, Ghosts and Goblins, Commando, and they did very, very well. So we had a lot of coin-op games. We had, Legendary Wings. We had a ton of them. For the first couple of years, we started doing that. It was so funny because most of the video game companies that started hired the Nintendo reps. Because Nintendo had independent reps originally too before they hired inside salespeople. And so I chose to go a different route. I chose to go and interview the sales reps, not hire the Nintendo reps, hire people that I thought and trusted. And there was a guy named Sam Borofsky who was in New York, who I ended up not hiring. I hired another company called JMR Marketing in New York because at that point there's a lot of retail in New York. Right now, retail, as you know, is a disaster. So I hired a company called JMR. Sam Borofsky writes a letter to the president saying what a bad decision I made and blah, blah, blah. And I should have hired him. I'll never get distribution because I didn't hire the right person. It didn't matter. We did a ton of business anyway. He just was upset I didn't hire him. So we progressed through a couple of years basically with Nintendo. And then I had the idea. I thought, well, rather than just having coin-op games, let's go and get some more family-oriented games. So that's when I went down to Walt Disney Company and met with a person named Shelley Miles, who was the head of the Walt Disney Computer Software at the time, and made a deal with her to do Disney titles for the Nintendo system. So we started with Little Mermaid, if I remember correctly. And then we did Aladdin, all the Disney afternoon stuff. We made hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, the first game we came out with was Mickey Mousecapades, actually. And Mickey Mousecapades was, Mickey and Minnie, it's a side scroller. Minnie would follow Mickey around, and Minnie wouldn't do anything but just follow Mickey, which is kind of funny because it was a little bit of a sexist game, but it was okay. At that point, it passed. So we didn't develop the game. Actually, a company called Hudson Soft in Japan had the rights for Japan to do that game, Mickey Mouse, and so we changed the name to Mickey Mousecapades. Over here, I went and licensed the title from them, got the code. We did some changes to it, and we marketed it without any development cost. And we sold, I don't know, well over 1 million, probably 2 million of them at that point.
How much? I got to go back later on to some stuff from Universal and Bally,
Sure.
But how much development was actually happening at Capcom USA in the mid to late 80s?
None. Okay. We acquired a couple development companies, but Capcom USA didn't develop anything. We got everything from Japan.
Okay.
Everything came from Japan.
So things like the alterations to ROMs and stuff to games like this Mickey Mouse Capades, was that farmed out to some outside team, or just from a business standpoint?
No, no. Capcom when we started getting into business, we were actually developing games in Capcom Japan.
Okay,
Capcom USA didn't develop them, but Capcom Japan did. So they were
gotcha.
strictly a Nintendo house at that point. They didn't develop anything but for Nintendo, and Sega was just starting because the Master System kind of failed miserably.
Yeah,
Um, that was a guy named Bruce Lowry who was running that one because I know Bruce well too. But that failed. Nintendo kicked their butt until they came out with Genesis. So,
yeah.
um, so I
And
mean, go ahead.
oh, and so once you take over the consumer side of things, what was the internal relationship, or how did the company see the strategy between arcade and console? I mean, was it seen as a symbiotic thing? Were they seen as two separate markets? Uh, what was the investment strategy? Where development funds would go, and how to market those two products or categories, I should say.
Sure, sure. I mean, initially in the early days of the consumer industry, at least in the Capcom, we considered the coin-op market kind of a testing ground. So if it did well in the coin-op market, then it would do well in the home market. Was kind of the thought process.
Okay.
Um, and then they would just basically start converting the coin-op to the consumer business, basically. Um, as time went on, obviously that wasn't the case because the coin-op market started to fall down, obviously because the consumer market started getting much better and much more distribution into the homes than it was in the past. And Nintendo controlled the market immensely. I mean, I don't know if any people told you, but they had, there's a chip shortage in the
Mm.
early days, and I'm not sure how much of that was manufacturer just controlling by Nintendo. And we were all, we go request, games, and we go request, 300,000 to give us 30.
Wow.
I mean, it was, and they would give you, depending on the quality of the game, they'd give you more. Um, until they started loosening up the chip supplies, and then, but Nintendo, I got to say, they were a brilliant marketing company. I knew Arakawa and Howard Lincoln very, very well. I went to Howard Lincoln's retirement party at he was at the Seattle Mariners corporate office. Is what they had, the retirement party up there. So, and
Nice.
I haven't talked to them in a while, but I'm sure they would. We were pretty close actually because we did a lot of business for Nintendo. We made a lot of money for Nintendo, a
Mm.
ton. My only
Yeah.
downfall really was I wasn't Japanese.
Well, that is a big question. I mean, what was the relationship between the U.S. and the Japanese offices like?
Well,
And I guess we can contrast Capcom with Universal at this point.
yeah, I mean, Universal was such a small entity compared to Capcom. I mean, I had a really good relationship with the Japanese. I would go over there once a month primarily, and I go over there, and we had a company house in called Kashikojima, which is south of Osaka. So I'd fly into the corporate headquarters, I'd be the only American or non-Japanese speaking person at the corporate house, and everybody's smoking, and they have a translator there, and Suzimoto they would try to beat me up to buy, because I would buy my product directly from Japan. They had a whole department that their job was to sell me product, even though we're the same company.
Okay.
They would try to sell me more. They try to get me to take more product. I'm like, no, 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 no. So that was their job. They had their export department was exporting to me, which is, I said, we're all the same company. What? I don't understand this. But that was how. There was a whole issue with transfer pricing back then. I don't know if anybody told you about that story, but
No.
so back in the early days, Capcom Japan would bill me X amount of dollars for the cartridge, basically, with a substantial profit to them. I would sell it for a very small profit. Okay. And so the profits of the company were going back to Japan. And that was considered, bad or illegal transfer pricing, because you can't really bill me. We're the same company.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah. So they ended up stopping. The government came in and stopped them from doing that. So we were able to show more profit here in the U.S. Even though we were still profitable, Capcom Japan was very profitable. They went public. I was the only, I think I was the only American that got stock in Capcom, founder stock in the company. So I had
Nice.
stock, it was some. It wasn't hundreds of millions of dollars, but it was a nice chunk of money. Okay, it wasn't great, but it was okay. I was happy I got it. So, and they treated me well. Um, so, uh, so I'm I'm running the Capcom consumer department. At that point, I would go to Disney. I went to Lucasfilm. I'd licensed Lucasfilm. I wanted to get the rights for Star Wars, but I couldn't. I ended up doing a crappy movie called Willow, which was a crappy movie and a crappy game, and we did the home game too. And then I got an NFL football license before anybody else had one. Because NFL was actually granting license. I think it was like $50,000 for a license back then,
Really?
which was
Jeez.
nothing. And then, but Capcom Japan developed it, and they don't know anything about football, so it really didn't do very well. But we had, at some of the shows, I had like Capcom cheerleaders come, and they were like, giving cheers for the football game, and we had back then we shared a space with Nintendo basically because we all had little kind of like little cubicles or little stations inside Nintendo's booth. So all the licensees did that before we had our own booth, basically. So Capcom were just, basically, and then I ended up, setting up, the sales department, the marketing department, the PR department, and to a point where we were doing hundreds of millions of dollars a year in sales. I was a little, I don't know. Towards the end of my Capcom era, that's when Mega Man came in too. That's when I still get crap about that one too.
Oh, the name change, you mean?
Yes, the name change. People still give me grief about that. I'm like, they're like,
I'm sorry, but I agree with you. I mean, I don't want to repeat stuff that the people listening to this probably know the story. You're the one who changed the name from Rockman to Mega Man for the North American market.
Yes.
Or the Western market.
Yeah. U.S., but Europe too. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that actually, and so you get grief for that. I'm sorry, but Rockman's a stupid name for a guy who's covered in metal and shoots lasers. But okay. Quick question. What was the relationship between the Capcom North American office and the European distribution?
It was fine. There was no problem there. I went over there to help set up that office originally. That was fine. I mean, they ended up buying their product from Japan, but they had a little distribution over there. Originally, we distributed our product through a company in England called U.S. Gold. That was our back years ago. A guy named Jeff. I forgot his name now. But yeah, U.S. Gold did it, and then we set up our home office over there. That was a couple of years into the marketplace, and then so we went along with Nintendo until Sega came out, until Genesis was there, and then I kept harping on Capcom Japan to support Genesis, which they finally did eventually, and we did a big press release. I think that Sofitel with oh God, I can see his face now. President of Sega. It was
President of Sega Japan. Mike, you mean Mike Rosen? No.
No, it wasn't Mike Rosen. It was U.S. Sega.
Yeah, no. The guy who came after Michael Katz, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I can't remember his name off the top of my head,
Tom
but I know him.
Kaczynski.
Yes, Kaczynski. That's right. Yeah, Tom.
Yeah,
that
took me a second.
Yep, that was it. Yeah. So we did a press release at Best Sofitel and had Mega Man come and had Sonic come and then but Japan just wasn't ready to support Sega and the development wise basically. So that's when the whole thing with Street Fighter came out.
Yeah.
The first Street Fighter that came out was we had to take it off the market because it was the coin-op game had, I don't know if you ever saw it, but it had giant rubber things on it. You pound it. Did you see that before?
Yes,
So
yes.
Okay, we had to take because people were getting injured, so we had to take it off the market.
Oh,
So
really? People were getting injured? I
it,
just thought it was a terrible way to control the game.
no, people were getting injured where they're smashing that little rubber thing. They were getting injured, so we had to take it off the market. Then
Oh,
we came back
wow.
with the buttons, so we had to come back with the buttons basically. So we had a series of buttons versus them smashing the thing, trying to get them to punch harder
Oh,
because the air would
jeez.
register. The air would register off, but it just didn't work well. So I came off the market. So Street Fighter comes out. We were selling an unbelievable amount of games, a ton of games with Street Fighter. Um, Street Fighter, Champion Edition, we decided to come out with it on Sega, so
Yeah.
which was good. And then we were going to come out with Mega Man on Sega, but that was way behind in development, so that took a long time. So we come out with Street Fighter. This is a good story too. So Street Fighter's big competition was Mortal Kombat, obviously at the
Hmm.
time. And the guy named Rob Holmes is and was a friend of mine who is the president of Acclaim.
Okay.
So Acclaim Entertainment has Mortal Kombat. They've licensed from Bally. We have Street Fighter, which is a better playing game, really, than Mortal Kombat, but it didn't have the death move that Mortal Kombat had. So in spring of that year, and I can't remember what year it was now, Capcom, like I said, didn't develop for Genesis or Sega. They outsourced the code to another development company in Japan. And so it's spring of that year, whatever it was now,
92 or
90,
93, something like that.
92 or 92, something like that, early 90s. I don't remember exactly what year. So Sujimoto says, I want you to fly to Japan and look at the game. So I said, flew to Japan and looked at Street Fighter Champion Edition. And I said, it looks good enough to release. Japanese were happy with it. They wanted to hold it to release it in that September against Mortal Kombat. I said, we're making a huge mistake. We have, 4 or 5 months, get it to the market. It's good enough to release, ship it. So they decided not to do it.
And this was developed not by Capcom in-house, but by Sega.
It was developed by an outside development company, but not Sega.
Ah, okay.
It wasn't Sega. It was an outside development company. I'm not sure who they used, but whoever it was, they didn't like the quality of the game, which just fried me because we had literally 4 or 5 or 6 months to beat Mortal Kombat to market, and we would have killed them if we had that lead time. So go ahead 4 or 5, 6 months. We now are releasing it at the same time as Mortal Kombat. So, they were a very good marketing company. Their development wasn't great, but their marketing was really good. And Rob Holmes was a really smart guy. So I said, I did this television commercial. You can Google it. It's Street Fighter television. It shows a security guard walking into the toy store. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I actually looked it up just yesterday, again, to remind myself. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really
So I did it intentionally because typically you don't call out your competitor like that. But I said screw it. Everybody knows we're going against Mortal Kombat. Let's just go against Mortal Kombat. That's when when Blanca gets the game and crushes it and throws it down. So we do that. We run a big campaign on that. We end up selling into the market 1 million units basically of Street Fighter. Unfortunately, we had probably 1.5 million units that were pre-sold. That 500,000 didn't sell because Mortal Kombat kicked our butt.
Oh wow!
So we had to basically negotiate and discount and get rid of it. But so what happens is I still have it here actually. Rob Holmes calls me on the phone. He goes, "You're such an asshole for doing the television commercial, right?" So I said, "Well, I said it's too bad." And then so we had at that point a Street Fighter comic book, which was a very horribly done comic book, but we licensed it out. We were licensing. I hired a guy named Danny Plesk to do our licensing. We did a deal with Hasbro. We did the Street Fighter movie. We did the toys. We did a ton of stuff, right?
Was that all negotiated by you guys or by Capcom Japan?
No, negotiated by us, by me primarily. Yeah, by me, by myself and my agent. For all intents and purposes, people thought I was the president of the company. because I made all the decisions personally, and George let me do what I want to do because I did well. So what happens is, so Rob Holmes gets the comic book and puts every ad for Mortal Kombat in the comic book. So all the ads in our Street Fighter comic book was Mortal Kombat, right? And so I have a framed copy of the comic book here, that he sent me just as kind of a joke, basically. Just said there's a letter with it somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but it said something like, ha ha ha. So, and Rob ends up retiring very early in the industry, taking his millions and millions of dollars he got at Acclaim, and retired. He lives somewhere in Long Island, if I remember correctly. But he's a good guy, very smart guy. He went there, and when they started Acclaim, we were already at Capcom, and I almost ended up working at Acclaim, as Rob Holmes' position. Actually, I didn't take the job. I didn't end up doing it anyway, but they were very, very smart marketing people. The company closed with some questionable things, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah. I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, that was. Go ahead.
Well, since we are talking about licensing, obviously, Street Fighter II got licensed for a bazillion different things. Products, including obviously the movie. Obviously numbers are one thing, but how important was that revenue stream for Capcom, and how did the iterations on Street Fighter II support or what was the relationship between the longevity of that license and the iterations of the game that kept coming out?
Okay. The revenue from the licensing really wasn't substantial. It just really wasn't. It was more like a marketing tool, basically, because the movie itself was atrocious. It really was. I mean, Raul Julia's last movie was not a good one. It just really wasn't good. Actually, Sugimoto, the owner of the company, is in the movie.
Oh, really?
He's in. If you ever watch the movie, there's a scene where Jean-Claude Van Damme is talking to a bunch of soldiers, like in front of him, and Sugimoto was one of the soldiers.
Oh, cool.
So he's in there. He's in the movie. He doesn't have a part, but he's in the movie himself. He was a good guy. I mean, every time I see him, I go to the E3 show every once in a while. Last time I was there, probably 5-6 years ago, I went up behind Sugimoto, the owner, and put him in a headlock. He started laughing, but all the entourage was a little upset because they didn't know who I was, basically, because I've been gone from Capcom for years, but but it was the time. It was a very, very fun time in the industry, I have to say. It was just something that we ended up making a killing. I mean, we ended up buying buildings in Santa Clara, which is very expensive, as you know.
Yeah.
I ended up running both coin-op and consumer because Bill Craven's left, and then there was somebody else running the coin-op department that little suspect. So the Japanese wanted me to clean house, so I did, and I basically took over the coin-op division. And then I ran the coin-op and consumer until I ended up leaving Capcom. And then, but the licensing part of it was, we did the handheld things with Tiger Electronics. Remember the little crappy LCD things we did licensing. We got some checks from them, but it wasn't a lot of money. It was like 50 cents a unit or something, and it wasn't a lot. But the Disney license was very profitable. It was very, very profitable. We did a game called, Capcom had this game. It was kind of a goofy little character. And I thought, well, we need some kind of license to put on there to make it still sell. So I went to, at that point, the Noid character from Domino's Pizza was big.
Yeah.
So I flew to Detroit, if I remember correctly. I met with the people at Domino's Pizza to get their character license because they were doing a lot of promotion and TV at that point. And so what I did is I said, we'll license the Noid character and put him in a video game, which we did. I said, but I want you to, put a coupon in every pizza you deliver for a month. So they did. It was like tens of millions of pizza. I don't know what it was at that point, hundreds of millions of pizza. So they delivered a pizza and my coupon every month, every day for for a month basically. And the game did okay. It wasn't great, but it did okay. Um, that was one of the games. And then we had the California Raisins game, which was a horrible game. And the license, because we had this license that was inexpensive, but they were marketing the Raisin board, was doing a lot of TV at the time. So we thought, oh, we'll do that one. I mean, we never lost a lot of money. We just made money on most of the stuff. And then Capcom started licensing product from other Japanese developers, so we started marketing their product under the Capcom brand also. So I'm trying to think of the games we had, but there's quite a few of them actually. We were selling a lot of product, a lot of product.
And how difficult was it to make choices as to what to release, especially on the NES, given Nintendo's restrictions on number of games per year?
Well, I mean, some of the stuff was there was another company called Romstar. Do you remember Romstar?
The name sounds familiar, yeah.
Romstar was, I think, Sugimoto's little pet project, to be honest with you, because there was a guy named Yasuki. First name, I forgot his last name. Yasuki. Guy named Rene Lopez, who was a sales guy, and one other guy I forgot. But so what Sugimoto would do is he would come over and he would give Romstar certain products, believe it or not, and then Capcom we'd get our first choice. And if I disagreed with something that he's giving to Romstar, I would raise hell with Sugimoto, and then he would give it to us anyway. But there was always this kind of like little battle going on between us and Romstar. And Romstar, there was something there that I didn't get, meaning Sugimoto must have been making something somewhere. Because having Romstar and having Capcom as your own company, and Romstar getting product from Capcom didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I'm not sure what was happening.
Gotcha.
I don't want to say much, but I think there's something that was not so legit. Let me put it that way. And then Kenzo started buying artwork. I don't know if you heard this story.
No,
he has an art collection that's probably worth, when I was there, $100 million.
Holy crap.
It's like he has like Van Goghs and Renoirs and very, very expensive paintings, because he would buy them. He'd ship them to the Santa Clara office, and I'd go into Nakayama's office. He's like, these original paintings are sitting on a crate on the floor in there, and he basically, I think what I heard is he donated them or did something with them, but he had some really, really expensive artwork. He had some expensive taste, no question about it. And then he started the winery, because we bought the land up when I was there. We bought the land. We bought like 2,000 acres up in Napa. For, I don't know, it was like $28 million when we bought it in 1990 or something. So he built a vineyard up there, and it's big money. So George is, and George, I've been trying to get a hold of Nakayama, but I can't find him anymore. I'm not sure what happened to George. Really, he was a nice guy. I mean, I think he ended up owning 3 or 5% of Capcom USA, and then sold it back to Japan when they went public for tens of millions of dollars.
Nice.
A ton of them. Oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just need to be Japanese. I'm about the right height. I'm just the right nationality.
Oh man. Quick question. I mean, we talked a little bit about U.S. Gold, and one of the weird things, and Capcom had a few titles that this happened to, where computer software obviously never is profitable as console or arcade.
Sure.
But where the same game would be released by US Gold in Europe as Capcom in North America, but it would be a completely new version of the game. And this happened with
a PC game you're talking about, or a console?
Yeah, Commodore 64 primarily.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yep.
Where it was Bionic Commando, the original Street Fighter, and I believe Gunsmoke. All three of those games had this situation where completely new versions were programmed and released for North America. And I'd be remiss not to ask how that came about.
Well, at the time, there wasn't much of a console business in Europe. U.S. Gold wanted the PC rights, which we gave them a deal at that point. And so they took the code and just developed a PC title based on the code. So they did it themselves, basically. We took a royalty, they developed the product, and we just took a royalty on top of it. So
Okay.
that's how it worked.
Yeah, but again, may not remember, but for example, Street Fighter there's two completely different versions of the game. It was ported twice to the C64. One version was only released in Europe. One version was only released in North America. As if Capcom USA had commissioned a version separate from the US Gold one. But
I remember releasing the PC version. I think it was developed by US Gold, but I think we had them modify it for the US, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
Because I don't think we developed it here. Yeah, I ended up buying a development company at one point that did some development in the U.S. A guy named Chris Riggs. We had a PC game called Pocket Rockets. Chris Riggs and a guy named I can see his face now. Lives in Hawaii. Can't remember his name now. Sorry.
No problem.
I'll remember later. Okay.
No sweat. Okay, we're pretty much at the end of the Capcom era before we move on. But I did have a couple of questions about Universal and Bally before I move on there.
Sure.
Universal, you mentioned the idea with the kit, and Mr. Do was revolutionary for being a kit. Was that an idea that came out of Universal US, or was that a development from Universal in Japan?
No, that was US. That was definitely US. They were still, wanted to sell dedicated games, and we were able to do the kit part of it, which was, something we came up with here. Take the old cabinet, throw a couple of graphics on a new board, and you have a new game, basically. So
yeah.
I don't think Japan ever sold kits, actually. I don't think they did. Well,
yeah.
I don't think.
No, important development. That's why I was like, I was always wondering. And now Mr. Do did get some licensing onto consoles and stuff. Were you involved with any of that back then?
Console business? No, not with Universal. No, no, I wasn't involved with that. Okay. That was after my time.
Gotcha. And then while the short period you were at Bally, were you just dealing with their video stuff, or also some of their pinball business?
Oh no, I was responsible for all the sales there. So it was pinball, video games, everything.
And what was there competition between those, or was there a preference inside the company for one form or the other?
No, not really. I mean, Bally Advance they'd been there for quite a while, actually, but they were not. No, we'd bring in truckloads of video games and pinballs and vending machines. We sell to like Oakland Cigarette, a guy named another guy that slips my mind, but he lives down in Palm Springs now. Rich Shear is his name.
Okay.
Yeah, Rich Shear ran Oakland Cigarette, so we would we just basically would have like every Friday we'd have like a barbecue, and we'd have all the operators come in and come out and get free food and look at the new games and buy whatever they wanted, basically. And then we just ship them. They'd either pick them up or they would ship them out to them.
Cool. And okay, so I guess we're at the end of the Capcom era, unless there's a story that I'm missing from my notes.
No, it kind of winds it up, really.
Yeah. So why did you end up leaving Capcom?
I left Capcom to go to a company called Game Tech in Florida. because I got a huge, large block of stock at the point, which
Nice.
is what I wanted to. I probably would have stayed, but I wanted an opportunity to, share in the money that I made for companies like Capcom, which Game Tech probably wasn't the greatest choice, but it really wasn't, unfortunately. I mean, I got stuck in a major political battle there, which I'd never anticipated getting stuck in the middle of that. But we made our money on primarily on PC stuff, which was Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, which was that's what we did primarily. We made a ton of money on that stuff. And before Take-Two started, we Ryan Brandt, we did all the distribution for Take-Two's product. So that's why I got to meet Ryan. And before Take-Two even started, we did all the distribution for him. So we had the exclusive rights through a guy named Irv Schwartz, who was the founder of Game Tech. Had did a deal with Ryan. So we did all the distribution for them. So I went from Capcom to Game Tech. I was a senior vice president there, running sales and marketing. I was only there a very short time, actually. Like I said, I got stuck in a political battle between a guy named Bruce Lowry, who was the president of Game Tech, and Irv Schwartz, who was the founder. So Bruce ended up forcing Irv out, buying Irv out for that $5 million at the time back at that point. But he was the founder of the company. And unfortunately, I got stuck in the middle of this political battle. I ended up I was there about 6 months, I think. That was about it. Called Bruce Lowry on the phone when I came home, because I was living there 2 weeks, living back in California 2 weeks. I lived in a company apartment, and I just called and said, I'm not coming back. I said, I don't want to be involved with this anymore. So I left. Left my stock and left everything, because it just wasn't a very healthy environment, to say the least. So,
doesn't sound like it.
No. So, and then I worked for a bunch of different companies after that. So I'm trying to think what other video game companies I worked for.
Let's see. I got BAM on my list, but I'm not sure if that was the next one. Or
no, that wasn't the last.
A little bit later.
Well, there was. I consulted for a couple different companies. Dreamcatcher up in Canada, because they wanted to set up a U.S. distribution facility and U.S. office, which I did for them. So I set up the sales and marketing for Dreamcatcher and left there. I worked for the French company
Ubisoft or Infogram?
No,
or Titus?
Titus. It was Titus. I'm like, who was that? Who did I work for? I worked for them for a little while. I went to Paris and met with them, and they had an office in Chatsworth at the time. So I ran that office for a little while, but the product they had was pretty crappy. So.
Oh yeah. Were you there for the Superman 64 thing that they did, or was that?
No, I was there. I was there for the game called Wild Animal Olympics, which was a piece of crap.
Oh yeah.
That was a piece of crap. I mean, I was doing everything. I was like reviewing the code, making suggestions on what to make the game better, trying to run sales and marketing in this horrible area of Chatsworth, right in the middle of like all the porn movie theaters, basically, all the porn stars, basically. It was not a good area. So I left there. I went to IDOS for a little while. I was at IDOS for a while also. Well, actually, that was after BAM. I think after BAM.
Yeah, that was after BAM.
Yeah. So I went to Bay Area Multimedia. So a guy named Ray Busey was the president and founder. He was ran Infogrames US for a while, and Ray and I have known each other for many, many years. He was at Data East when we had a battle with Data East back in the early days. So Data East wanted to sell Commando. I don't know if you heard this story, but
no.
Okay, so at Capcom, basically, Kenzo Sugimoto had given, don't ask me why, but all the rights for all the Capcom games in perpetuity to Data East, which made no sense.
Now, what do you mean by which rights? To
sell the Capcom games in the U.S.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if he gave all the games or gave some of the games to Data East, but in perpetuity, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's forever.
Yeah.
So we had a little battle with Data East. We hired an attorney. They hired an attorney because we wanted to sell Commando, if I remember correctly, because they wanted to sell Commando. So at that one point, Bob Lloyd, who was the president of Data East at the time, said, okay, fine, we're going to let Capcom do it. So that kind of like dissolved that relationship with Data East, which was fine. But that was a whole story because they actually did have the rights to sell Commando. But, basically trying to keep a relationship with Sugimoto on a good terms, they decided to just say, okay, we're not going to fight it. So they just let it go. So
Okay.
that was what happened there. So what happened? So Bay Area Multimedia, we actually took that company public, which was good. This is right, because I remember what happened. It was right before 9/11 in New York. They were on a road show. So Ray was there. Actually, Rob Holmes, going back to Rob Holmes, he put money into the company also. He was the president of Acclaim, who put money into BAM, Bay Area Multimedia, BAM Entertainment. So we made a ton of money on a game called the Powerpuff Girls, which was huge. We sold a ton of them, and that really helped the company go public. And then Ray started licensing, like Sound of Thunder, some really, really movie licenses that just didn't do well. So before that, I was at a company called Metro 3D. So Metro 3D, a guy named Chinese, what's his name now? I forgot. Well, George Nakayama was now like the president of Bay Area of Metro 3D. That's when George called me to come in and run sales and marketing for him at Metro 3D. But the owner of the company, who was Taiwanese, Steve Lin, that was his name. So Steve Lin wanted to develop everything internally. They were way behind on all of the development. Came in, we were one of the first licensees for the Sega. When Sega wasn't Genesis.
Dreamcast.
It was Dreamcast. Yes, Dreamcast.
Yeah.
So I was able to negotiate a license with Tom Kalinske to be one of the first licensees to release product, which was unheard of because we were a new company.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't usually get a right to sell initial launch product unless you're really well known or have a really good track record. So we had a game called Armada at the time that was being developed in-house. It was a space shooter, but the whole game was supposed to be online, which was really premature, number one. And number two, it was a space shooter that you're supposed to be able to land on a planet and fight on the planet. Unfortunately, they couldn't develop that part of it, so it was just a space shooter. And it was like a bad version of Space Invaders, is what it was. And we weren't able to. Yeah, we were like 3 months late from the launch to get the product on market, which was just ridiculous. So the reason I talk about Metro is that I left Metro, went to go work for BAM Entertainment.
Yeah.
I left Metro, left Nakayama, went over there as the VP of Sales and Marketing at BAM Entertainment with Ray, who I knew well, and take the company public. We raised, I think, $30 or $40 million at the time. Ray was actually on a road doing a road show. He was at the restaurant below Tower Number 2, I think, in New York.
Oh, wow.
On the day on 9/11. So he was having breakfast with some possible investors, was there, saw debris falling down, basically, had the sense to get out of the building, run down the street with the other people. He's from New Jersey, so he ended up taking a ferry over to New Jersey, but he actually was there when it hit.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, he was there, so he saw the whole thing. And then we went public after that. So, and then I saw the writing on the wall. There was a lot of money being spent on development that really wasn't that good. And so I ended up leaving BAM and went back to Metro. I went back to Metro 3D because the president, he finally agreed to start, doing other things, basically, and developing other product based on, not having in-house development because our team wasn't that good. So I
Hmm.
stayed there until the company, I think, basically liquidated. It just wasn't. It was poorly funded, number one, and the product wasn't that good. So I ended up leaving there. And then,
A quick question about the Metro 3D, and this was one of the things in my research I was wondering about the timeline. So there were three titles actually released by Metro 3D that were remakes of old Cinemaware games, old PC games. How
right.
did that deal come about?
Well, we went to the guys at Cinema where they wanted some distribution basically. So we took Three Stooges and I forgot the other ones we did, but they
Uh,
were just they were bad. They just were not good games. They were not
no.
good. I mean, it was Cinemaware at the time had a pretty good reputation, um, but it just wasn't. They weren't very good games at all,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Okay,
You
so
know.
those were developed by Cinemaware then, and you guys just bought them up, or?
Yeah, yeah. We just
Okay,
basically took the distribution rights for them.
gotcha. And how did going back to BAM, how did they get all those Cartoon Network licenses? Because it was Powerpuff Girls, but then also stuff like Ed, and Eddie, I think, and stuff. Was there any kind of relationship there with the Warner Brothers? I think it was Warner Brothers at that time already.
Yeah, Ray had a pretty good relationship with the Cartoon Network. That's how we got it. That's how we got in there. And then I developed a relationship with him myself after the fact. But yeah, Ray had a good. He did a lot of licensing when he was at Infogrames, like Jurassic Park. He did some pretty good licenses, I got to say. But it was in the early days. You could pretty much license anything and sell it, pretty much.
Yeah.
Um, but then people started to get a little bit more you know, discretionary as to what they're going to do and what kind of games they like. So some of the licenses that we had at BAM were just not that good. We
Hmm.
developed, and we did well with Dexter's Lab and Powerpuff Girls and Ed and Eddie, not so much, but we did, they sold, the Cartoon Network is a pretty good brand. It
Yeah.
was, you know. And I
Hmm.
worked for a company, I worked for 505 Games for a while too, which, do you know
Yeah.
that company? Okay.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. I could not tell you a single game that they released off the top of my head, though.
Well, so, boy, now I can't remember the president's name at this point. I could see his face. He had called me. Rami and Rafi Galanti own the company, and they're based in Milan, Italy. So they wanted to start a U.S. facility. So I came in as senior vice president of sales and marketing to run 505 Games, help them set it up, which I did. I mean, we did some pretty decent distribution, but some of the licenses we had were not so good either. We did a lot of the National Geographic for kids, but it didn't make a good game. Basically,
Yeah.
it did make a good game. So that was based down in Agora Hills. So I would fly down Monday, fly back Friday, and then ran their sales and marketing department down there. And I can't remember the president's name now, but he came from the movie industry, didn't know anything about video games, period.
Oh,
He knew nothing about them. So in reality, he would pick my brain on what to do and how to do it, which was fine at the point. I ended up telling him how to basically train him on what to do. So and then I
hmm.
left there because I got tired of going back and forth to LA all the time.
And the Eidos period. Now, I believe you joined the company. Don't want to say after its heyday, but was it was
Well,
kind of after its heyday.
it was definitely after its heyday, but um, Jane Kavanaugh and Bill Ennis ended up buying IDOS out of bankruptcy, basically.
Mm.
So they bought it for nothing, in essence. Um, Bill Gardner, who's a friend of mine still, was the president. Came in to run it. So what happened was IDOS made a ton of money the first or second year that I was there because Bill wanted me to come in and run sales, which I did for him. So IDOS showed a huge profit because all of the development costs were all written off.
Yeah.
Okay, so they required this company with no development costs and product that was almost done. So we sold it. It was like 100% profit.
Yeah.
So they made a ton of money the first couple of years. I was only there a few years, and then they ended up at one point they ended up selling when they started losing money because they were spending like drunken sailors, basically. um, so I ended up leaving there. They sold the company. It's been sold a couple of times since then. I think Warner Brothers ended up getting distribution rights for them. Um, we did Conan. It was a role playing game which didn't do very well. It was a license. We didn't develop it.
Mhm.
Licensed. Tomb Raider Legend did okay, not great, but okay. Because we owned Crystal Dynamics, was a development company that was on the floor above us. That was huge. I mean, the development company was hundreds of people up there, and to recoup your development costs when you have that much money into it, it's a tough thing. I mean, break
Yeah.
even was very high numbers we had to sell. It did okay. Tomb Raider Legend didn't do great. Um, I was it was interesting because I had stock. I was given stock grants in IDOS, so every quarter I would sell my stock grants. So I just didn't keep. I got to get rid of stuff. So then they get rid of Bill, um, the parent company, ends up replacing Bill, and then they basically got rid of most of the staff when Warner took over. And then it was sold to Square, I think, after that, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. It belongs to Square nowadays.
Yeah. And they had some good. I mean, we did Hitman, which was a good game. Tomb Raider was a good game. I just had some pretty good content. Um, Unfortunately, it just was money was not well spent. But a good story is so Bill Ennis he was a big man, and he just passed away recently. I think, unfortunately, last year. Comes over, British. He lived in London with his wife Jane, or his fiance, or partner, whatever you call her. And Bill Gardner goes, I want you to entertain Bill Ennis one night. I'm like, okay, fine. So I'm like, what am I going to do with this guy? He's, comes over for a few weeks. I said, well, I'm going to take him to the exotic erotic ball. Have you heard of that before?
I shouldn't admit it, but yes, I have.
Okay. So it was at the Cow Palace. So I'm like, well, I'm going to take this guy to the exotic erotic ball. So we go there, and he was just completely amazed about what happens at this place. People are all in costume, or they're completely, butt naked, or whatever they're doing. I was just laughing, and we just kind of walked around, watched the people, and it was pretty interesting. But I think wasn't quite like going to a restaurant or a bar, to say the least. That was fun.
It's one way to strengthen business ties.
Well, that's true. True.
So yeah, you were at Eidos up until about 2008. That would have been coinciding with first attempts at online retail and so forth. Was that anything that you guys already had to start to confront, and were there any strategies already being built up for how to do digital distribution?
We were just starting. I mean, we did some licensing with Steam and those kind of places, but we didn't do anything ourselves. I mean, we tried. Conan was an online game, basically, an online playing game. We tried to get people to buy upgrades and that kind of thing with Conan the Barbarian, or just Conan. It had some pretty big hype, but the game kept being delayed by the developers, and it did okay, but not great. I mean, GameStop did okay with it, but it wasn't as big as we anticipated it being.
Yeah,
unfortunately. So.
And well, speaking also of GameStop, I mean, you would have seen that whole era when we used to have Babbage's and Software, etc., and all these different places, and they all basically coalesced into GameStop. As a person in sales, what effect did that have on your negotiating position, on your ability to get shelf space and so forth?
Funny you ask. So we used to call them the Three Sisters. I don't know if you knew that, but
no,
the Three Sisters. It was Babbage's, GameStop, and Electronics Boutique. So Babbage's gets, Babbage's was run by, oh God, he ended up taking over GameStop. Babbage's software, oh geez, forgot his name now. Oh well. So Babbage Software, et cetera, basically, they ended up merging. And then GameStop, what happened was Electronics Boutique was trying to buy GameStop, is what happened. I don't know if you heard the story about that. So Electronics Boutique's trying to buy GameStop. GameStop gets funded by the guy that owned Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
And so they ended up buying Electronics Boutique. So Doreen McKenzie and Bob McKenzie were senior people at GameStop that were there they've retired since, but I had a very good relationship with all those guys. So it wasn't hard to get them to buy our product or my product because I had a very good relationship. They usually gave me a shot at any company I went to. So it was fine actually. I went down there. I was down there many, many times. Go see GameStop, go see Walmart, come back. And they controlled a lot of the market, I have to say. Yeah, they would always hit you up with, marketing dollars. And, everything was pretty much on a consignment basis, even though they didn't say that. I mean, that's how GameStop bought. They don't say it's consignment, but if, they'll pay you for what they sell. And if it doesn't sell, you need to discount it. So if you wanted to buy 50,000 pieces, they'll buy it. They'll sell what they can, and then they'll come back to you for more money to mark it down to sell more. So,
oh wow!
So they had a pretty good monopoly when it came to that kind of stuff. If you had a game that sold well, it was no problem. If you had a game that was marginal, then you ended up discounting it. So that's how it typically worked with them.
And that wasn't the case when they were the Three Sisters.
It was not as bad. No, it wasn't as bad. I mean, Electronics Boutique was Pete Roithmeyer I used to see. And there was KB Toys at the time. There's some big retailers that sold video games.
Yeah.
They don't exist anymore, but that's how the market actually progressed at that point. I'm trying to think of what's the name of the president of GameStop? God, I'm blanking out now. Oh well, I'll remember later, I'm sure. But no, we had a good there's a good relationship with all those guys.
And I guess back in the 80s, you also had the department stores, the Searses and of the world would also sell games, at least around Christmas time. But
yeah, you'd sell Sears, you'd sell the drugstore chains, you would sell, Costco if you could get in there. Walmart was a huge customer. If they bought, but they were very selective. I mean, the typical Walmart appointment, I'll tell you, it's pretty funny actually. If you've ever been to a Walmart appointment, so you go to Walmart in Bentonville, fly there to Bentonville, you go down and sit there in this giant lobby with like desks set up like you're in school. There's a huge reception lobby with 3 or 4 receptionists, and they would call, at 11:30 appointments line up. So 11:30 appointments would be like, 20 or 30 people lined up to go see these buyers. And you go to like conference room 35, conference room 50. There must have been 100 conference rooms there. Little teeny things, maybe, maybe 10 by 10, maybe a little bit larger than that. And you have 20 minutes to present your product. That's it.
Wow.
So if you can't get it in 20 minutes, they literally kick you out. The buyer meets you in the office there in the conference room. You talk to them, you show your product. They don't give you a decision. They look at you, they look at the product, and they decide later if they're going to buy it. Which just, then you're on pins and needles trying to get them to wonder if they buy it. Luckily, most of the product I sold to Walmart was pretty good anyway. And then you buy it, and if they did buy it, you'd be pretty much golden as to, what you're gonna sell. But a good story, going back to Capcom days, I remember another good one. So back then, Kmart was a big player in the video game industry, and they were a big buyer too. And a guy named Gene Rakowski was the buyer. We used to call him Mean Gene the Buying Machine. So a guy named Lou Giannetti and I, and actually Nakayama, when Capcom first started and the video game industry was just getting off of its feet, and they still had a bad taste in their mouth from the Atari days when they all got burned with the inventory. We flew back and saw Gene Rakowski because Lou Giannetti had a pretty good relationship with him. Fly back to it was on Big Beaver Road in Detroit. I remember that. And so Gene ended up buying, I don't know, $2 or $3 million of product.
Oh, wow.
on a string, basically. So if it didn't sell, we'd take it back. So we personally guaranteed the product because we figured it would sell. We're going to get distribution where nobody's really buying anything at that point. It was tough in the early days. So Gene ended up buying like $2 or $3 million worth of product. It was a huge win for us because I don't think he bought anybody else's at the time because Nintendo was just starting. And so we ended up doing a deal with Kmart, which is huge.
Yeah, no, I remember the Kmart's back in the day, well, when they still had Kmart's, would have their own little electronics section and stuff. And yeah, that was one of the first places where you could pick up an NES back, I'm going to say 86, 87, something in that range.
Right, exactly.
Oh, man. Going back to the Capcom and the support for the NES, obviously those decisions were being made in Japan. Did you guys in the States have any control over which titles you were going to release? Were you any kind of gatekeeper function for that?
Well, we were. We actually had to. We were able to, I guess you could call them, Americanize the games if we needed to. And Japan would make changes to the games as we requested. So I had a staff that would do nothing but come in and evaluate the games and make suggestions how to make them better, basically, for the U.S. market. So they would do that. And Japan would make the changes as we needed. We were mostly sales and marketing here. Like I said, we did some development as time went on. Dave Siller came and worked for us for a while, if you know Dave. He did the Aero the Acrobat game.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was Dave's game. So we had Dave work for us for a while, develop some games for us. In addition to the people we acquired, Chris Riggs and who was it? One of the well, what I did too, really, what was his name now? See his face. What I did is that I sent an American developer, I can't remember his name now, to Capcom Japan, so we can give influence on the development and what's happening and what's appropriate for the U.S. market. He ended up living there for quite a few years, ended up speaking Japanese, and marrying a Japanese gal and everything, basically.
Cool.
And he's a brilliant. I think he might work for Microsoft now. But he was really a really talented developer, and so that was my eyes and ears in Japan. He would be there working with the development staff on what to do and how to do it. That's appropriate for the U.S. marketplace.
Okay, so it sort of had at least a little bit of influence over it.
Yeah, we had some. I mean, yeah, we did have some. I just got rid of that call.
No problem.
Okay.
And so after the Eidos situation and 505 Games, where did you go? What came after that?
I'm trying to think where I went after that. I worked for a technology company in London called Marmalade for a while, because I wanted to get into more. Basically, it was basically handheld stuff. It was basically, the competition for them was Unity, if you know Unity, basically.
Yeah.
So Marmalade was a cross-platform development tool that you can develop games for Android, iOS, Microsoft at the time, and so my goal was to set up distribution and sales for the U.S. Unfortunately, the code was very, very old. It was done in C++ code. It was very old code, basically, and it didn't work that well. I did some deals. I mean, I had contacts with Warner and Disney and that kind of stuff, and so I was there for a couple of years, and the company ran out of money, basically. Unfortunately, they actually hired me without ever meeting me, which is kind of funny. I talked to the president of the company he was in Switzerland, called me on a conference call with a couple of other executives, ended up hiring me, and I flew to London as an employee without even meeting anybody. So I flew there to London.
Nice.
So they checked me out. I guess my reputation was pretty good. I guess so. They ended up hiring me, and I just ran their sales over here. But it was just like I said, it was old code, and Unity had more money. It was an easier process to use their stack versus the Marmalade one, and I just wanted to get into the more of the handheld market, mobile market than doing, packaged goods at that point. So I did that for a while, and then I think that was the last game company I worked for, actually. I think, or somewhat of a game company. And we did a deal with Roku too. Actually, we did a Roku deal where we were supplying them games for the Roku box, basically. So I did a deal with them that were based here in not too far from where I live. So.
And as a sales guy who's seen all these changes through the years in the market, what's your current feel of the mobile gaming market? I mean, basically the arcade is all but dead at this point. Consoles are also changing with the microtransactions and so forth. Where does the salesman come in a world with the App Store?
That's a good question, actually. A very good question. I'm not sure where the salesman comes in with the App Store, to tell you the truth, honestly. I mean, as long as there's traditional retail and there's traditional things like that, there'll be a need for them. But I don't know. I can't tell you where that's going to go because I'm not even sure. I think that's, as broadband gets better and bigger and faster, I think it's going to be people are more accustomed to playing, online versus going out and buying stuff out the store. That's why GameStop has had so much trouble. I mean, the retail sales well, right now it's a whole disaster. So put this, Corona virus aside, it's just they're having a rough time because people are just not buying games at retail as much as they did. I mean, and GameStop's been trying to find other sources of revenue for years. I mean, that I know of. And it's kind of hit and miss a lot of times, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what happens. I mean, people still want to have a game when it first comes out, like right away, and the pipeline is not as fast as it could be with downloading a game because they're not quite there yet. Then they'll still go buy them at retail. But I think there's still a need for it. Will it ever go to strictly online? I don't know. Maybe if the pipeline gets fast enough, possibly, to download the product.
And I guess, what should I be asking you, given all your years of experience in this, that I haven't asked yet?
Wow. Geez. What should you ask me? Well, the E3 shows are pretty fun. Actually, I don't know if you knew this. When the industry association started, it was called the IDSA, International Digital. So I was the vice chairman of the organization. Okay. And then when I left Capcom, that kind of went with Capcom. But I was the vice chairman. I was going to be chairman of the board of the industry association the next year. Helped set up, all of the, a guy named Dr. Pober was the head of the ESRB. We set up the ESRB. I'm not sure if Mike Katz was involved with that or not either. Maybe not. But because at that point, when we decided to open up to have the E3 show, we were talking to the Consumer Electronics Show about actually being a part of that show. And they wanted way too much money for us to be a part of it. And then we were going to go, then we went to the MPAA because we were going to license the MPAA ratings for movies for video games. That was the original thought. So we met with, what's his name now? One of the older guys. He was head of the MPAA at the time. You probably could Google him and find out. Met with them. Yeah, and I forgot his name, but kind of a curmudgeon old guy. But so we went there. They just didn't want to do what we wanted to do. So we said, well, just forget it. We'll just set up our own ratings board and set up our own industry show, which is what we did. Jack Valenti, that's who we meant. Yes, exactly. That's who we meant. Jack Valenti. That was him. And really wasn't very open and cordial with us in the video game industry, because we went down there as part of the IDSA board trying to license the MPA system. So we said, we'll just set up their own ASRB. So we set up their own entertainment rating software board. A guy named Dr. Pober, who you should interview him. He's really kind of a character. He can tell you some stories from that I probably don't even have. Dr. Arthur Pober. He's in New York. He's a kick. And so I became good friends with him, actually. So we set up the rating board, and set up the IDSA, and then set up our first, E3 show, which was extremely profitable. Set it up, and then we had it in Atlanta for a few years, and Vegas for most of the time. Not Vegas. We had it, no, actually in LA. And it's, I'm not sure what it'll, I think they've canceled. In fact, I'm pretty sure they canceled this year so far.
Yeah, they canceled it already.
Yeah, I think they canceled it. Yeah, pretty much everything's canceled so far. But that was a fun time. And then when the video game industry in the early days was getting hammered by senators and congressmen, we had to go and basically see all of the local senators. So we saw the local senator here, and I can't remember his name back then, but he was up in San Mateo. I remember meeting with him. He could have been German. I forgot the guy's name now, the senator's name. But I remember sitting there across the table from him, because all of the board members went to go see each different senator in their area. So we went and saw him, and he looked at me and he goes, "Why should I help you?" I said, "Well, because we're trying to make their games aren't violent. We have the proof to say they're not violent. Blah blah blah." And he goes, "Well, have you donated to my committee lately?" I said,
"Wow."
I said, "No." And he said, and that was it. That was the end of the meeting. I'm like, wow. I said, "I got to buy you off?"
I guess he's honest.
I guess at least I put it out there. I guess. I don't know. Put it out there for him. I'm like, okay, see you later. But that was an interesting situation. And then when Nintendo sued Atari and Tengen, I was one of the people that testified during that. I think Mike Capps was in that too, actually.
Yeah.
So I was one of the people that they subpoenaed and testified on behalf of Nintendo, because Nintendo asked me to do that for them, so I did that for them. And I got on the witness stand, and the Superior Court was grilled by, the other attorney and Nintendo's attorney, and it was a pretty interesting time, I have to say.
Actually, those are both two interesting issues. Number one, about the ESRB. As somebody who was watching the media and stuff back then as a teenager, it really did feel, at least in the media reports, that there was this imminent threat from the government actually stepping in. Did you guys feel it that way, or did you just see the ESRB as a marketing tool to get these people off your back?
No, we were feeling they were going to come down and crack down on us, definitely. Mm-hmm. So we decided to be proactive and set up something before they decided to do it for us. So that was one of the big. I mean, nowadays the big games are so much more violent than they were back then. It's unbelievable. We're talking about a little cartoon character that's punching people, but now it's like a real life person on screen. But yeah, we decided to be proactive and set up our own, because we were afraid they were going to come in and start cracking down on us. Definitely.
Gotcha.
I mean, I remember at IDOS we had a game. Another story. So we had a game called 25 to Life. Did you ever see that game?
No.
It was a horrible playing game, but that we had a lot of flack from Congress and Senate, because it was actually I think CNN did some reports on it too, that people were actually boycotting the game because it was so violent, because it was basically the title 25 to Life. You basically either played a policeman or you played a bad guy. So if you played a bad guy, you can shoot the policeman. Okay. So it was really not, but the game sold like wildfire. I mean, it was just, you could count on selling, 25 or 50,000 every couple of months. It was just, and it did it just because of the name, I think, because the gameplay was not very good at all.
Yeah. I just looked up the Wikipedia page for it. Yeah, the review scores are pretty abysmal.
Yeah, it was bad, but the game sold.
Oh, you gotta love it. And going back to the Atari Nintendo thing, you guys as a third party publisher, what was your initial reaction when you heard that Atari was trying to bypass the chip? Was this something that was potentially interesting for Capcom to also consider, especially given the restrictions on the number of games per year and stuff?
Oh, well, we were such a big Nintendo supporter. We were, they were able to reverse engineer the thing and do games, but no, we weren't. We were just basically following Nintendo's lead. So we didn't do anything to actually support the Tengen part of it. So no, I testified, as I said, on behalf of Nintendo when they asked me to do it. I think Greg Fishback did. I did. I don't know if Mike Katz did. No, Mike Katz was on the other side, I think. I forgot who was running Tengen at the time, but yeah, no. And then they ended up, winning the case anyway. So
yeah. Well, especially since Atari didn't quite do a clean room reverse engineering on the chip.
Yeah, no, they. I know. Yeah, they got caught doing. Yeah, they should have done it. They didn't do it the right way, but yeah, they got caught doing it that way. So.
So, looking back on your days in the hardcore video game industry, what would you say is the thing you miss most about it nowadays? About the way it was back then.
It was such a young industry. I mean, it was a small industry. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun, I gotta say. A lot of fun. It was, being, one of the industry, people that just started off in it. It was just, everything was new, it was different, it was quickly, it was fast changing. It was, people were just very friendly there. It was challenging at times, obviously, but besides the excitement and all that kind of thing, I don't think there's any other industry at that point or even today that showed such a huge progression so quickly, and had, basically overtook the movie industry, which, I mean, when I first got into it, I knew the home industry would be big. I didn't know how big it would be. I just knew it was going to be big. That's why I switched over from coin-op to consumer, because I thought, well, coin-op, you sell, 20,000, you sell 10 million of a cartridge. It didn't make sense that, it wouldn't be big.
Good point. And one final question, since you were there when Final Fight came out, was the idea of a transsexual hooker being one of the enemies in the game the weirdest thing you ever saw coming out of a Japanese game? Or is it just on a longer list?
Only Japan. I mean, Japan's interpretation of certain things is a little twisted sometimes. I mean, the Japanese, even though they're very polite and they're very, you go over there, you see, as an example, they're a little hypocritical sometimes, I would say. There's legalized prostitution there that they don't really tell you about. But if you go buy a Playboy magazine, it's all blacked out basically back years ago. They black out all the places, but they have like legal, brothels down the street from the office. It's like, I don't get it. So yeah, no, the Final Fight game did okay. It was a decent game. It wasn't a great game, but it did pretty well. As to the character, who knows? It probably was a guy named Okamoto-san. Do you know Okamoto? You probably don't know Okamoto, but
no.
He's a Capcom. He was a Capcom. He's now living, I think, in Singapore or Indonesia somewhere. He was the head developer of Street Fighter. So he did a lot of the coin-op games, basically, a lot of the successful coin-op games. And rumors are that he ended up having to leave Japan because he was involved with some kind of shady people, is what I heard. He's actually my Facebook friend. If you go on Facebook, on my Facebook, Joseph Morici, you can see Okamoto on there. You can actually, his English is not so good, but he was brilliant, I got to say. He made a fortune, a ton.
Final question. So, what would you say do you have any parting words for our listeners?
No, nothing really. No, no. The video game industry was a lot of fun, and I had a very good career in the video game industry. I was lucky to be into it, really, and did well, and had many friends, still do. I think it's a fun industry, and I think it's something that will continue for many, many years.
Awesome. Joe, I really can't thank you enough. This has been an amazing, amazing set of stories.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed another Video Game Newsroom Time Machine interview. You can leave us comments on Twitter, Instagram, and if you like what we're doing here, drop us a couple of bucks on Patreon. All the links are in the description below.